that we may be blessing not only to us but to all others, O Lord, and live like a salt on this earth, O Lord, Heavenly Father. Help us, lead us, and guide us. In Jesus' precious name we pray. Amen. So, Hebrews chapter 11, and we have only one verse for Jacob. We have a lot to meditate. Hebrews chapter 11, verse 21, we all can read together. So, by faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of Joseph's sons and worshipped as he leaned on the top of his staff. So introduction. He had a very eventful and colorful life, and this we will go through a couple of different stories. But we all know, he was the son of Isaac, patriarch of the Israelite nation. But it is interesting if you see focus on 11th verse, Paul, who's the author of Hebrews, he's writing, by faith Jacob when he was dying. So if you see, if he has lived 100 years, just for as an example, he's capturing only the last moment. He's not capturing 99 and a half. He's saying at the end, when he was dying, not that he did not have faith, but he wanted to grab their attention, right? So yeah, he's talking about the end of his life. So it is really interesting. That's true. But as I capture, just go through this, what Macintosh says. I will not read it for you, but it's very interesting. I thought, uh, basically there are a lot of books written on the ending of Jacob's life, or the close, or and he captures the close of Jacob's career stands in most pleasing contrast with all the previous scenes in the eventful history. But just go through it, we're not going to spend time, but I thought ending here wants to say something, right? But we will try to focus on that. All right. So continuing, we see here, by faith, blessed, worship, and lean. So what was Jacob's end like? That's what we are trying to capture from Hebrews 11, but we have to go back to. So many people, when they are dying, just imagine, the people in your circle, if you know, or even if you think, just we are far away. I hope, far away from there. But even when it is coming, a lot of times we are afraid to die. We are fearful, right? Some look back with disappointment or wasted, no, I did not do this and this and that, right? Some are even bitter towards God, thinking, they haven't been dealt with what they deserve. I was so good, I was nice, but God still dealt with me like this. But here in Jacob, in his last moments, I would say, one of the most blessed character in the Bible, right? He not only he knew he was dying, right? And so what he did was blessed, blessing maybe others will also do, okay, I'm going. But worshiping at the last minute, at the last breath, that's amazing. Uh, faith blessing people and worshiping God, and then he died. I think that's why I think Paul captures here. But to understand this whole, just one verse, we have to look at his life, right? So why talk about Jacob? Who is Jacob, right? So to understand that, it's very important that we understand, who's Jacob, right? We all know the story of Jacob, but Jacob is basically, it is, we are Jacob, it is us, it's the natural man. That's the whole story. So far we have we saw so many heroes, probably Sarah was the closest one which we could imagine, because Sarah was like us, thinking in that direction, right? But now Jacob, it's talking, it's entirely us, a natural man, a natural, the nature of a man, right? This is our story, if you see, and we will see how he says, Watchman Nee once wrote a book, Changed into His Likeness. He said, he was talking about the three patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So, and Nee pointed out that each life taught about something. Uh, Abram's life talks about characters that, it is characterized by faith. Isaac, we know it shows the importance of grace, because he got it. His birth itself was like, gift, right? He received pretty much everything from Abraham. So it talks about the importance of grace. But when it comes to Jacob, it's very difficult, right? Because eh, I mean, you can imagine, as we now, when we look at, like, how, I would say, like, he was a maybe a businessman, a cunning, a shrewd guy. I mean, you say, like, in Hindi, if I use, I will say, like, he was a kamina. Kamina tha. Matlab, like, in English, in a soft way, he was a rascal. I mean, some biblical scholars have captured it, but, like, you can think about the worst word, like, in shrewdness, in like, cunningness. So he was that. So we will see four things to understand his Hebrews 11th verse, how it was captured to see. To see that, we have to first look at his birth. The second thing is his first encounter with God. Like, what happened there? The art of there also bargaining and bartering and dealing, like, less than what you had. So he was there also, he was doing that, and we'll see that. The second thing is wrestling with God, right? And that's important. First sign of progress and blessing through brokenness, right? How he gets broken. And finally, we'll say his surrender and rest in later part of life. That's where he says, like, he is one of a blessing death, like, in the entire thing. Nobody will say, like, he low. If you read the entire chronicles, like, David and all that, like, you'll see, oh, he died and rest in, like, he was with his father's tombs and all that. But nobody where you will find, like, while he was dying, he blessed, he worshipped, and he died. So that's an amazing. So that's why I think, like, Paul captured that. But the birth. So 25:19 to 26. So I'll read verse 19, chapter 25 of Genesis. And these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. Verse 23. And the Lord said unto her, two nations are in thy womb, and two manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. And the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. Verse 25. And the first came out red all over like an hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. Okay. So here, as we are looking at the birth, like, I mean, this is a story itself, so we don't have to spend much time, but important points I've captured. So first 20 years, just like Sarah, uh, Rebecca was barren. An important point to note here was just Isaac prayed to the Lord. Like, I think it's an important thing, like, how when, for certain things, like, as a husband, when you're praying, like, here Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife, and the Lord answered the prayer, right? That's an important point because here, uh, Isaac prayed, Lord answered, right? The second thing is, in the course of his pregnancy, uh, she was feeling the kick or kicks, and then the kicks were so, I mean, if you read, like, she had to uh, ask the Lord. uh, I mean, if you see here, why is this happening to me? She's inquiring. I mean, I cannot, being a man, I cannot imagine, but I was a swimmer in my younger days and all that. And if you see, when you have to pull somebody down, right? And if somebody is floating up and you have to pull down, like, you can pull down easily, put the legs down and pull, and you can easily go up, right? So I think he was, I don't know, but it was probably painful for Rebecca, right? Um, but anyway, she had to literally plead the Lord, why is this happening to me? And Lord answered, two nations are in your womb, right? And the two peoples, and of course we know, like, later on this became Northern Kingdom, like, Israel and then Palestine and all that, like, so two nations, uh, of course, like, coming there. So, and peoples from within you will be separated. And then finally, if you look at the names, Esau means red, of course. He was red and hairy, and Jacob means trickster, supplanter, heel. Supplanter, if you mean, like, just like, he, when he came out, he was holding his heel. So that's what it means. And basically, that's how the name itself means, like, grabber of a heel or something like that. So that's the birth. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Jacob's first encounter with God. This is where the rubber meets the road, right? Now, this story, when we read 28, and this is where uh, you you when you meditate, I mean, sing that hymn, it makes a lot of sense, right? Probably we'll read this also, but just a backdrop. We know that Rebecca and Jacob, how they tricked Isaac, right? And stole the inheritance or the blessings of Esau, right? So they did that, and he's now this was he's basically running away, and he's far away. First time out of the comfort zone of mom's, like, he was a mama's boy anyway. So let's read 28, 10 to 17 here. uh, we see that, like, God appears to him. God is saying that he introduced himself in the dream, and I'm the Lord Yahweh, like, the father of Abraham, and God of Abraham and God of Isaac. So here it was very I mean, I have two promises in my personal life, like, from 2008 and 2011 here. So uh, if you notice here, there are no ifs and but condition. God is not even saying, like, if you do this, like, I'll provide, like, or like, leave your country like Abraham and go here, then I will, like, give you, whatever you want. Here it is basically no ifs. He is saying, like, so many promises. He's giving five promises. I will give you this. I'm with you. I'll watch over you. I'll bring you back. I will never leave you nor forsake you, and all that. Like, five. And God is, like, without asking, telling anything to do. It's very strange. Like, one thing really caught my eye. So promises made on the basis of God's grace alone, right? And promises not only guaranteeing the blessing of God over Jacob's life, but those of his descendants. See, if I'm getting a blessing and my family is getting a blessing, is a different thing. But this is to the extending to the whole world. That's amazing, actually. I mean, like, one of the great promises. Like, if somebody is reading, it's definitely an encouragement. Like, when you're reading this portion, and I think that's when you sing that hymn, it really catches your attention of certain things from this paragraph, right? And finally, if you see, how did Jacob respond to this? So God is saying, like, I mean, of course, it's a dream, and he wakes up. Now let's see, like, what he does, right? So for that, we have to read. So this is the first encounter. Now here he's bargaining, right? So it is the same continuation, but let's read 20, 21, and 22. It's a complex if statement, I guess, for software engineers. Like, just imagine he's saying he knows that God is giving him five. So, and he's telling, like, if God does five things, and he's clearly capturing this, like, if, if, if all five, and then he's saying, I'll do two things. And two things what? I'll acknowledge that he's my God. And second thing is, I'll give my tithe. So this is the picture of a natural man. If you really see, that's how, like, no matter what we do in our prayers, we are selfish. In our certain things, like, maybe because I do this, like, I'll get my blessings. And we look at prosperity, or, like, visa extensions or anything, right? All that. These are there, but we I think it's naturally comes to us. Maybe because I'm doing this, I get these blessings or something, right? Now he's trying to bargain to deal with God, right? Five things God is saying, and he's saying like, no, I'll do two things, right? If he does, there's a condition. So if and only, so it's a complicated. So I mean, if you really see, Lord God, he has given his only begotten son, Lord Jesus Christ, right? As a natural man, like, as a believer now, like, I think we are very mature, and he's saying like, I have given your spirit, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. Same thing, like, he in Jesus Christ you have the, like, every spiritual blessing. But we still, like, we don't rest, we are not at peace, we constantly struggle. So I think it's a natural man, like, all our lives are brought up on working hard and getting something in return, like, that's no matter how strong we are, we are still, this is the nature of a man, right? I think Jacob pretty strongly portrays that, right? Though Jacob is showing, but it is basically us. So this is the first encounter of his interaction. God is saying like, I'll do all this, but he's bargaining, if you do this and I'll do that, right? Now the second, so we have covered two things: his birth, like, how he his name was Jacob, and he truly, like, was Jacob, right? A trickster. He's showing like, he's trying to trick here also, and trick who? Like, God the Father, right? Now Jacob's wrestling with God. Now here, uh, it's very important, right? When we read this statement. So, but again, giving a little bit of backdrop. Now, once he runs from here, I mean, like, after this dream, where does he go? He goes to his uncle's place, right? So far he's been tricking, he gets tricked, right? So he gets tricked, like, we all know the story, so I'm not going to tell the story. But here, like, he gets, like, he, instead of, he loves Rachel, he wants to get married to Rachel, but he gets tricked, gets married to Leah, finds out, like, all that. But let's read this, and then we will see Jacob's wrestling with God. So this is the portion where after 21 years, after being with the barn for 21 years, he comes out, and now, like, he's what would you say, he's pretty much, like, kind of, like, meeting and reconciling with Esau, right? So before that, I mean, like, the night Jacob comes here, like, took his two wives and two maid servants and his 11 sons, crossed the ford. So all that, right? And so if you see here, he three times, I think, like, Bible captures that he asked his maid servants to take gifts, making sure, like, okay, he's pleased and he's taken care, like, before, I don't know, because he's so angry he may still want to kill him and all that, right? But now that night, like, so Jabbok is a place. So Jabbok means he empties you, kind of, like, he will empty. That's the meaning of that place. Where is that? This is the second encounter, right? Now we have seen when Abraham met with God, what happened? They ate together. Their fellowship was, like, eating. But here, strangely, when God is meeting with Jacob, they're wrestling, not just, like, for some time throughout the night. And if you really see Jacob, uh, a couple of things, right? Jacob was, uh, if you really see the fight, Jacob was not leaving. He was not leaving in the sense, probably uh, he was tired, he was weak. So he was as if, like, he was holding the grip. And in some grip, like, no matter, like, you want to leave also, you cannot leave, right? So, and he's there also, he's bargaining. So he's saying, like, unless and until you don't bless me, I will not leave. So God here ultimately had to, basically, we see that he's asking, Who are you? And then he's acknowledging who he is. He's saying, I am Jacob. Now, if you really see, I am Jacob, he's not telling his name. He's confessing his sins. Basically, Jacob means Kamina, right? Jacob means rascal. He's saying, like, I'm that trickster, that bad guy, and all that. So he's here, like, basically, God is emptying him out, right? So when he finally acknowledged that I am Jacob, then basically God is trying to, God is blessing him, right? God anyway told him, like, I will give you this, I will bless you this, right? But here, I think all this, whatever he was doing, his first encounter and 21 years being with Laban also, he was not emptied out. He was probably, if you read Hebrews 11, he's completely content, like, as he was dying, like, he's blessing and worshiping and going in peace, kind of. Here, all 21 years he was thinking, like, maybe I don't know what I did, it was Laban, like, who cheated me, it is my circumstances and all that, right? Now he was always thinking, like, maybe because of Esau I have come here, I had to run, all that he must be thinking, all that. But here he knows, like, the enemy is not others, but enemy is me, the real me, like, the real, his own nature was his enemy, right? And that's where, like, we, if you see God, like, after wrestling and all, finally God says, like, okay, good, now I have a new name for you. And that new name is Israel, which is prince with God, prevails with God, God prevails. uh, this is an important statement from Charles Spurgeon. And he says, like, I bear willing witness that I owe more to the fire and the hammer and the file than to anything else in my Lord's workshop. It is basically our circumstances. See, if God is dealing with you with trials and certain things, it is like, he's chiseling you, right? So he's saying, like, that fire and that hammer and that file, that's the best thing in my Lord's work. I sometimes question whether I have ever learned anything except through this rod. If everything is good, if God is blessing you and you are in a comfortable zone, then probably maybe you're not growing because you have taken, like, okay, I'm doing this, like, God is blessing, there is no need. But real thing comes, like, when you're going through that tight path, right? Rough situations. So I think it's an important statement by Charles Spurgeon. So this is where we see, like, he's broken. So first at the birth, we have seen how he came. First encounter, he's again bargaining, like, he is not completely turned. He's bargaining, asking, like, if you do all this, like, I will do this. And finally, at Jabbok, he is broken. Finally, evidence of a new Israel and Jacob. So here an important statement. I think Genesis 28 and this statement, whatever we read, they say, I mean, it's a prophetic kind of a passage which is still not fulfilled, because now if you read the entire story of Jacob, now you at least you have an understanding, like, how he's broken. Israel as a country is not yet broken. If you know, like, there is a term which is used, the day of Jacob's trouble. It's a biblical kind of terminology where a day will come where, if you really see how, like, Israel is kind of a nation again, like, which reflects Jacob's character, but ultimately there will be a day when, like, God will wrestle with Israel, right? So that day of Jacob's trouble is yet to come. So 28, Genesis 28 is again, I mean, the portion 32, whatever we have read, is a prophetic kind of a thing which is yet to be fulfilled. On a side note, right? So evidence of new Israel, Jacob's rest. Genesis 42, 36, 37, and 37. So Genesis chapter 42 again. Now we started with 25, we come till 42, so a lot of chapters in between, of course, like, Joseph's story is also there. But here we see, uh, I mean, we know the story, right? famine comes, all the brothers, of course, except Benjamin, everybody, all the brothers go to Joseph, and then what they do, and then finally Joseph is telling them, asking question, right? Do you have another brother? And all that. So bring him to me. And then if you bring him, probably you had another brother, I'll give that, all that thing. So Benjamin basically is the most cherished position of, with Rachel, he had two children, Joseph and Benjamin. So Joseph, according to Jacob's mind, is dead, right? And now he's saying, when they come back and tell all this, I think it's very difficult from his point of view, from Jacob's point of view, that I cannot. So it is again a natural man talking. But now we have seen that he has wrestled with God. He's a changed man, right? So ideally, if you want to see, his other son Joseph also, of course, he's saying here, no, 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 I mean, I cannot, right? He's saying here, uh, but Jacob said, my son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he's the only one left. If he harms come to him, the journey you are taking, you will bring. But I think a still small voice is talking here, and we'll see that. So he's not old Jacob anymore, because he's broken by God. And after that transformation, we see that he's more leaning to trust God, right? And that's where we see here. Let's read this again. Sam, thanks for reading all the verses, but interesting. I mean, this is again clearly, there's nothing to explain here. Uh, but couple of key pointers, verse 6. Uh, I mean, basically, I think Jacob represents the. I said, he represents us, a pure nature of man, how cunning and wicked we are in our thought process and all that. So here, after the transformation, before and after, how it has taken, and in the last statement, right? It reminds me of Ruth, basically. If I perish, I perish, right? And a very strong statement when he's saying, if you think, the same cunning man could have spoken this, who wants to become numero uno, number one, coming out, cheating and doing all this. So there's a huge transformation after, his interaction or his wrestling with God, right? uh, but ultimately, he's now saying, okay, he wants to, he was really blessed, right? Here the biggest thing is, through him his entire family also gets kind of saved, right? Of course, we see the Joseph's blessing here. If you see, not only Jacob is transformed, but his family, all the family members also really uh, understand, uh, the true presence of God's hand in their life. So that those are the two things. But ultimately, that's Jacob's rest. But the last statement is very, very important, right? From where he has come. So he's saying, so this is the action, right? A lot of times we can merely say words, but here he's saying he knew, I mean, he knows, it's enough. Uh, uh, what do you say? A situation which he doesn't know, what will happen. He's saying, take your brother also and go back to the man at once, right? And may God Almighty, right? He's leaning on the God, he's broken. Now, the important thing, if you see in Hebrews 11, is he is always with a rod. And I don't know whether you have played any game or anything, when you have, your leg is not there when you're there, you're always leaning, right? And you are bowing like this, right? So he has been so many dependence on God, that he grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your brother, other brother, who's he talking about? Joseph, right? And Benjamin come back with you. As for me, if I'm bereaved, I'm bereaved, right? And I think, it's a huge transformation. And with that conclusion, right, what are some of the things? Now we'll go back to Hebrews 11. So first thing we see, he's pictured in faith, right? It's a faith that has been well refined, tested, and purified. So we also, right, unless I think every situation, whether it is financial situation, marital situation, family situation, visa situation, anything, when you go through that tested and when you lean unto God, like, so closely, depending only on Him, you truly start trusting. So, you see, your faith is refined. Next time that situation happens, like, God will take care. So I think Jacob is a picture of how God works with the natural man, right? Dealings, testing, and trial. And we remember, like, Charles Spurgeon, he's saying, like, he said, like, if I'm normal, I have not learnt anything. That's a strong statement. And it is true, actually. If you're comfortable, if you have proper job, if you have a good house, if you have everything going smooth, you are not growing in Lord. Guaranteed. Maybe your growth is there, maybe your faith is there, everything is there, maybe you're doing certain things, but when you are chiseled, when your corners are cut, when you're in a painful situation, that's when you grow. And that's what we learned through Jacob's life. And that's why he's pictured in faith, definitely, for sure. Like, we have seen the transformation, right? Secondly, when he was dying, he blessed. Here the important, I was struggling, like, okay, we all blessed, like, what's the big deal? If you see, say, imagine, like, these two are my son. He's older, he's younger, right? The other way around. So even now in India, right, the property goes to son, right? Christians also same thing. We have not changed. Daughters don't get anything, right? I don't know why, right? But ideally we are not treated equally, even in Christians. There, during that time, the birthright or anything was only for older sons, right? The eldest will get the inheritance, eldest will get that. That was the law. That was kind of like, now here what he's doing, he's blessing the youngest of all. So that's the greatness of Jacob. During that time, he went outside of this, like, he's blessing. This is not a normal blessing. That time, when you say blessing means, why did he choose his birthright? Because he wanted to get that blessing. So here, not only, like, he would have chosen, okay, who's my oldest, let him come, let me bless him. No, here the important statement is that he blessed the youngest people, right? That's why Hebrews 11, if we turn, he say, like, he was blessing who? Benjamin and Joseph's son, right? Who was not, like, older of, like, younger of all, like, he's trying to bless even the young, like, so he's transformed, really transformed, so he blessed. Thirdly, at the end of his life, he worshipped. So in the study of Abraham, we saw, like, word of worship has the primary of bowing down, right? But here, after the battle or the fight or the wrestling with God, now, like, he's always lent, like, every time he takes his staff, he's leaning unto God. That's the blessing he got. Who can say, like, with a limping thing, he got a blessing from God? That's the importance here, like, he's not only fighting with God anymore, he's not making deals, right? He's not tricking, he's not, like, but he can bow down in his heart. So here also, right, worship is bowing down, but with his rod and staff, he's always bowing down. I don't think you can take a step by putting your head straight, and with your rod, like, you can take, you have to bend down. So it was mainly, like, leaning unto God. So he can look back and truly can be amazed how God has protected, blessed, and carried him through many trials, right? And then finally, the same thing, the leaning on his staff, right? Which I already explained. So these are the things. So Jacob discovered, like Paul did, that God's grace is sufficient and God's power is made perfect through weaknesses. And that's a true testimony. So that's why when we read Hebrews 11, though he's saying, like, at the end, but it was a strong statement of whatever he achieved through his character in life. So one thing always, I had this question. Uh, so we see Abraham before transformation was Abram. Abraham, now we, like, even New Testament, Paul and all, they call him Abraham. So nobody calls Jacob as Israel. Jacob was name was there. So, but we don't see any any author or anybody calling him like, okay, Israel. He's always referred as Jacob only, right? So that was always my question. But I think, like, Israel translations. But I think in some translations which I have, uh, if I go back, correct. So Israel, verse 6, Israel asked, right? So there are certain translations, but I think there are a lot of we use a lot of Israel also, right, in the book. So when we say Israel, Israel, then it would be contradictory. I mean, this is only. I mean, there is more about Jacob. Like, there's a lot about Jacob, but I think to capture the Hebrews 11 portion only, like, we have touched upon certain factors, but Jacob otherwise is, I think, before and after you can see a huge contrast. So if somebody has a very negative character and then, like, you change to positive, like, you see, right? But somebody is, like, right on the border and he's okay. So that gap is little, but his gap is quite contrasting.